Hi, I'm Simon K. Jones, and you're listening to the audio version of Tales from the Triverse, my ongoing weekly serial that crosses crime fiction, science fiction, and fantasy. This is the Vaen'ka, Part 1. Outskirts of Lairn, 3203, early verdant. It rained. The sky poured endlessly to the ground, a torrent as dense as a waterfall. It rained, and then it rained some more. Lola had never known anything like it. A roar accompanied the water, the sounds of trillions of impacts on soil, rock, rooftops, canvas. "I guess we picked a bad time to visit Lairn," Lola said, holding the corner of the caravan's window to stop the water from rushing in and pooling at their feet. "It's been like this for the last month," Slava said, "and it will be raining for another 2 at least. It's the wet season." A farmer trudged along the dirt path, a donkey in tow, a wide-brimmed hat covering his head and shoulders. Tiny waterfalls poured from the edge of his hat onto the floor, missing the man's body. The donkey had a shield over its face to prevent its eyes from being flooded. There were people working the fields, even with clouds so thick that it seemed like dusk. They walked wooden platforms, raised above the waterfields. The caravan's wheels were large and wide, designed to negotiate the waterlogged muddy roads. The sound of the horses' hooves shifted as the ground underfoot changed from soil to stone, and out of the thick, wet air loomed the city of Lairn. "And I thought London was damp," said Lola, resealing the window and sitting back down on the wooden bench. It had been a long ride, and she was eager to stretch her legs. "Completely different climate," Slava said, shaking her head. "Northern hemisphere on mid-Earth, while Lairn is equatorial on Palinor. Couldn't be more different." That's why it was still so absurdly hot and humid, despite the rains. Lola wiped her forehead with her bare arm, both of which were drenched with sweat. The air itself was moist, her eyes constantly on the verge of filling with unintended tears. She felt oddly like she didn't need to blink as often. Pilpo was snoring in the corner, somehow managing to remain appealing despite her mouth being half open. Darila was riding in another caravan with Maxim and Zlati. Yana was travelling via a different route with Christian and Lakazra. The crew was careful, never moving as a singular group. Especially when approaching a city-state, it served them well to entertain an abundance of caution. At some point, Christian and Lakazra would turn their eye properly towards Lairn, and then the city would know about it. That was not the intention of this particular visit. There had been a murder. One of the Akehu leaders was dead, and they needed to know why and who was responsible. It was Lola's chance to show her worth. In the verdant months, Lairn was a city of sails. The streets were adorned with colourful fabrics, positioned carefully to catch the rainwater and direct it away to the gutters. In the dry season they served their alternate purpose, shielding the inhabitants from the relentless sun. Stepping down from the rear of the caravan, Lola marvelled at the dusty, dry, red sand underfoot. Above, it sounded like the sails were being pummeled by rocks from a far-off assailant. Solid walls of water poured from their edges, forming fast-flowing streams in front of every building. "Try not to look like a tourist," Slava said, hauling a large pack from the carriage as she led the way. A small improvised footbridge over the stream took them into the foyer of an inn. It was a whitewashed adobe building, surprisingly cooler inside, despite the humidity. 2 rooms, she said to the Vaen'ka behind the desk. There was a complicated water feature running through the foyer, a mix of fountains and small interior pond areas. Tiny fish swam from one side of the room to the other, some of the roots open and others covered by glass. It was fancier than Lola had expected. "Got the keys," Slava said. "Let's go." They passed through an arched doorway and into a courtyard area. There was a cloister-like corridor running around the edge, which was fortunate given the continued downpour. "Must be nice in the summer," Lola said, observing the benches in the open courtyard, entirely sodden. "It gets too hot," Slava said. "If you sat on that bench when the sun's up, you'd burn to a crisp." She glanced in Lola's direction. "Especially you." She thought to protest, but it was a fair point. "This is us," Slava said, passing one of the keys. "You two are in there, I'll be in here. Yanni will join us later." Lola had struggled to remember the details of the plan. What about everyone else? other locations across town. You sure I can't be with Darila? Slava rolled her eyes. Of all of us, you two have the most recent arrest warrants. Your faces are well known. Putting you in the same hostel would be a bad idea. It made sense. Besides, there had been an awkwardness between them since Tapu. Lola felt that she'd done something wrong, but also couldn't think of anything she would have done differently. Come on, Pilpo said, unlocking the door. Let's take a look. Entering the room, leaving Slava outside, Lola took in the space. 2 small, simple beds, basic facilities, a sink in a corner, a small table and storage chest, the usual dual-purpose lanterns in the walls, one for traditional candle lighting, another for use by a wielder able to work the elements. She pulled aside a light curtain to investigate an open doorway into a small space containing a hole-in-the-floor toilet, what appeared to be a natural shower with a retractable ceiling piece. Look at this, she said, pointing. We can pull this back, let the rain in, and have a shower. It would be cold, but in Laen that would be a momentary relief from the endless, sticky heat. I wonder what they do in the dry season. Get hot and dusty and sweaty, Pilpo said, bouncing on one of the beds. Places like this employ loads of wielders to run climate control spells, pulling water up from underground, creating pockets of cooler air. Expensive and difficult, so it's only the rich families which get it. But yeah, the short version is that everyone gets very uncomfortably warm. Everywhere Lola went on Palinor, it was a new experience, a different perspective, always having to relearn what she already knew or challenge her assumptions. It was exhilarating and exhausting. We stayed in a place a bit like this when we were trying to get to mid-earth, Pilpo said, standing and spinning on the spot, her arms outstretched and her knee-length skirt twirling out like an umbrella. Me and Zlati and Larissa. It wasn't this nice, obviously. We couldn't afford anything that didn't come with a free selection of dirty sheets and mould. But it was a good time. We had so many plans. She sighed. It didn't work out, but me and Zlati at least ended up falling in with Christian and the others, and Larissa managed to get through the portal to mid-earth. I'm sure she's doing something exciting now. Started a business. Met a handsome young London man. Teaching kids. She could never quite decide what she wanted to do. So many ideas. Shit. It couldn't be put off any longer. It would be unfair. Crossing the room, Lola took Pilpo's hands and sat them both down on the edge of one of the beds. Pilpo, she said, quietly, carefully, there's something I need to tell you. Pilpo's eyes, already naturally big, seemed somehow even larger. Yeah? She kept hold of Lola's hands. Your friend, who you and Zlati tried to get to London with? Larissa? A flicker of confusion. Yes, what about her? I'm really sorry. I'm so sorry, but I'm afraid she died. The words felt too harsh, too sudden, but she couldn't think of a way to make them softer. Pilpo's face drooped, the corners of her mouth and the crease of her eyes, usually tilted towards excitement and joy, sinking. It was part of an investigation back when I was working in the SDC. As a detective back in London, we investigated what happened to her. Larissa died? Tears welled up, Pilpo's hands shaking now. We found who did it. We got them. I know it's not much, but maybe that's something. I'm so sorry, Pilpo. Who did it? What happened? She was staring through Lola, seeing something that wasn't there. Was she killed? I'm sorry. She got caught up in some bad stuff as soon as she arrived. When you and Zlati were deported back here, she ended up falling in with an exploitation gang. Between heaving cries, Pilpo nodded. But you got them, the ones who did it. We did, me and my partner, Clark, and Kaminsky and Chakraborty. We did everything we could. You killed them then. You avenged her. Well, that's not really how it works, but they were arrested and put on trial. They're in prison. It's not enough, Pilpo said, collapsing against Lola, crying onto her chest. She didn't deserve it, Lola. She hugged Lola tightly. She didn't, Lola said. She could feel the tears through her shirt. I wish it wasn't true. Thank you for telling me, Pilpo said, sniffing, lifting her face away from Lola. Oh, I made a mess, she said, smiling weakly, looking at the wetness on Lola's chest. It's okay. It's horrible, Pilpo said, looking up into Lola's eyes, still clutching onto her. "But I'm glad you told me. Thank you, Lola." Then she leaned forward, closer still, and kissed her. Startled, Lola froze for a moment. Pilpo's face so close, her eyes so big, still rimmed with tears. Then she was kissing her in return and tearing at the Ainfar's clothes and marvelling at her luminous green skin, and all else was, for a time, forgotten. "I've never been with someone who wasn't human," Lola said, as they sat, entwined and naked, on the bed. "Oh," Pilpo said with a mischievous smile, "you're in for a treat." Somewhere distant, in the back of Lola's mind, was the understanding that this is a mistake. She pushed the thought away as they both tumbled onto the floor, laughing and discovering one another. Across the city, a hooded figure stood in an alleyway, partly shielded from the rain by an overhanging balcony above. Their clothes were ragged and grimy, though hidden by the heavy cloak. The hem was soaked through, tendrils of damp trying their best to rise up through the fabric. They sensed the end was near, for them and for their kind. There was nothing left, no kin to share with, no possibility of passing on their skills to a new generation. The hunger gnawed at them, ever more demanding, fogging their thoughts. Lifting a hand, they scratched at their face with one of their long nails, now more like a claw, or perhaps a talon, curved and sharp and still flecked with blood. They accidentally scratched themselves, the cut stinging. A sensation, at least, among the numbness. Their own drawn blood was almost indistinguishable from the burnt carmine of their skin. A feed was needed. They could feel the power draining away, as it always did, faster with each day. Their appetite was too great, and there would be nothing left soon enough. Perhaps that would be best, to drift away, the last of them, gone forever. One last time, then. Or maybe two. After all, once they started, it was difficult to stop. Thanks for listening. You can leave comments and find a lot more over on the newsletter at simonkjones.substack.com.